Good morning, everybody. I'm Zach Blanchard, and this is Political Brew. Joining us this morning, former Democratic State Senator Cathy Breen and conservative radio talk show host Richardson. Good morning to you both.
Now, why am I always branded as a conservative? You know, I'm a reasonable guy.
That's your brand.
That's just your brand.
I know. I'm kidding.
First this week, Maine's Supreme Court is upholding a ban on Sunday hunting after a Reedfield couple argued it went against a new constitutional amendment on the right to food. You might remember back in 2021, voters approved that amendment to the Maine Constitution, protecting the right to harvest your own food as long as it doesn't infringe on private property. Ray, I want to start with you. Was this the right decision here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm a great believer that there should be a day where we don't have activity, where people can walk out in the woods if they want to and not fear. I've never struggled with it. We've had it here for how many years, how many decades? So I'm fine with it. I don't think it's a restriction on constitutional rights to own a gun or a constitutional right to go after food. There are 6 other days in the week.
Cathy?
I agree with Ray. And yeah, off to a good start.
It's Good Friday.
It's you know, we've had no hunting on Sundays, you know, from time immemorial, and I don't think the constitutional amendment that we passed is going to change that. And I agree that there's many ways to get your own food without hunting on Sundays.
All right. Governor Mills announcing more than 100 affordable rental units will be coming to communities around the state this week. She was at a housing summit in Portland. Those units will be built in Waterville, Hallowell, Rockport, Newcastle, Rumford, and Sanford. Now, this is all part of a goal to create 84,000 homes and apartments by 2030, which is based on current population trends in Maine. Here's some of what Mills had to say.
No, the biggest impediment to our economic growth is the lack of affordable housing for our growing workforce. All had a hard time hiring workers because employees can't find affordable housing.
Now, according to the governor's office, the new units will take between 12 and 18 months to build. Cathy, some argue, though, that this is just a drop in the bucket.
I agree, it's just a drop in the bucket. What's really at the heart of our housing problem is local zoning. And having served at the local level, it's abundantly clear to me that what we need is more zoning that allows multifamily housing. The Greater Portland Council of Governments did a study a couple years ago that indicated only 5% of the land in Cumberland County is zoned for multifamily housing. So what you have are these one-off projects like in Cape Elizabeth and Cumberland that go to referendum and fail. And what you need is just parts of every town where you can put multifamily housing, and you know, then the market will respond and the units will come.
Ray, isn't the governor doing enough here?
I don't think so. And I think it's because the approach is wrong. I had Vinny Mayetta on my program on Wednesday, I think it was, and we talked extensively about how hard it is for developers to develop. He was talking about one project where he had to spend over $2 million in permitting fees. That had nothing to do with the engineering, the architectural design. We have got to stop charging these guys so much money for all of this stuff and help them put concrete in the ground in the places that we want it. It is really difficult to get a project approved, and it's so costly, sometimes developers just give up on it. If we want to build more housing, let's make it easier for the builders to build it.
Cathy, you had something to add?
Well, the reason it's so hard to build, Ray, and I agree with you, is because of local zoning laws. And what happens is, rather than just have it, you know, zoned and have the builder just come in and get the permit and do the project, they're having to jump through all these hoops of a special project, a contract zone, it goes in front of the town council, and it just becomes so cumbersome and so expensive. So what we really need is zoning that makes it clear that there are parts of every town where we're going to put multifamily housing so developers and builders can understand the process. That's where it's going to go. Have at it.
I would agree with that, with this exception, that we should not be disrupting single-family home zoning. There was a proposal before the legislature 2 sessions ago to just basically get rid of single-family home zoning, and I think that's dangerous.
All right, we'll leave it there. This week, the Maine Senate passed a bill that would set minimum staffing ratios for nurses in the state's hospitals. The bill would set an average ratio of 2 patients for every 1 nurse on duty. Some hospital groups say that kind of ratio could restrict them to treating fewer patients because there simply aren't enough nurses out there right now. On the other side, though, the Maine Nurses Association is calling the bill the most significant legislation for patient safety that has ever been proposed in our state. Now, Ray, there are, of course, some additional votes here, but a potential big win for healthcare workers.
Well, it looks that way. The union certainly supported it, but we have a lot of nurses in my radio audience. We hear from them all the time. They don't like the idea that it's coming down from Mount Olympus, how they should have patient ratios. They think that when they're on the ground during the day, they can figure that out. Because one of the things that will happen here, and we've seen it happening in some nursing homes, sometimes people get called into work when they're sick, maybe not they're fully blown COVID, but they're starting to show symptoms. When they have to meet specific ratios put in place from on high, it makes their job very, very difficult.
But Cathy, this is meant to be a protection for those nurses.
It sure is, and I can say, you know, I have a young adult child who has some special needs who's in the hospital right now, probably discharged today, but I have literally lived this issue of nursing ratios, direct care workers, all that stuff. There's a couple of things. One is, you know, the housing issue again, and just being able to hire enough people to meet the need, and where are those folks going to live, how are they going to be compensated. And you know, I don't know enough about the specifics of this particular bill. I can just say that I get nervous when the legislature legislates healthcare. So I feel a little concerned about it, but again, I don't have all the details.
All right, next, all eyes once again on the Supreme Court and the issue of abortion. Rallies popped up outside the court this week as justices heard arguments in a case challenging whether the FDA was right to expand the use of the widely used drug mifepristone back in 2016. The plaintiffs argue the FDA failed to adequately evaluate the drug's safety risks. Cathy, a decision in this case is expected by early summer. How do you expect the justices to rule here?
Well, I think if you followed the case, you saw that what really was the crux here was standing, and whether the plaintiffs really had enough of a potential harm or an actual harm to even bring the case, to even make their case. So I think even the most conservative judges on the court who voted for Dobbs are very skeptical that this particular group of plaintiffs really has any standing to make this case.
Right?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with her, although I'm absolutely pro-life. And if it were my choice, we would not do it this way. I think that it's very clear if you listen to the arguments, the justices are probably going to side against the plaintiffs and side for this drug.
All right. Ray, Cathy, thanks so much. Before we take a break, former Senator Joseph Lieberman passed away suddenly this week. Lieberman represented Connecticut in the Senate for more than 2 decades and was the Democratic vice presidential nominee in the year 2000, running alongside Al Gore. He was 82 years old. The Morning Report is back right after this. Good morning, everybody. I'm Zach Blanchard, and this is Political Brew. Joining us this morning, former Democratic State Senator Cathy Breen and conservative radio talk show host Ray Richardson. Thank you both for staying with us.
How's that?
The Happy Warrior.
There
yes.
we go.
Good to be here.
It's better than curmudgeonly radio host.
All right.
Which I often get.
First, a new development in the push for tougher gun laws in Maine. Speaker of the House Rachel Talbot Ross introducing a last-minute bill to create a red flag law. If passed, the bill would allow family members to petition a judge directly to have a person's guns removed temporarily. Maine's current yellow flag law requires police to be the ones to remove a subject's guns by first taking them into custody. Cathy, the governor has already introduced her own bill to try and improve the current yellow flag law. Is there some kind of divide between Democratic leadership and the governor's office?
Well, if there is, it wouldn't be the first time or the last. But listen, a red flag bill is very similar to what you have in a domestic violence situation or in the case where you think a child might be in danger, where a family member can go to a judge who makes a ruling for temporary removal of weapons based on the facts presented. That's what other states have. It's much more streamlined. It's much less cumbersome than the yellow flag law. 18 people died in Maine. I think it's time for a red flag law. It's very simple. We have them in other states. And again, it's when, you know, the family members of Robert Card knew that he was in mental distress, knew that he had weapons, and they had no agency. They had no authority, no mechanism to pull to alert authorities and to, you know, go to a judge on their own to try to keep people safe. That's what the red flag law would do.
But Ray, they did go to authorities in that situation.
They did. So Kevin Joyce, the Cumberland County Sheriff, was on my program on Good Friday, and we talked about this a lot. There's just a lot of tension with freedom and a lot of tension with the Constitution. And that's one of the things that he talked about with these yellow flag laws. They recently had an incident in December, and he went into a great explanation of how they were so conscious of making sure they did not violate the man's constitutional rights. He hadn't actually done anything, but his behavior was outside of the norm, and some people felt threatening. I struggle with these laws because I don't want to see any person who's innocent lose their constitutional rights, even temporarily. But I also understand that people are very concerned after Lewis, and it was a great tragedy for the state, great tragedy for all the families. So that tension, I don't know the answer. I wish I did. But I'm always on the side of freedom and individual rights.
I think I err on the side of safety.
Yeah.
And, 3 days is 3 days. And it gives someone in a crisis the time to get evaluated, possibly get admitted, possibly get treatment. And after 3 days, that person can petition to get those weapons back.
We'll see how it goes with just a few weeks left. All right, now to the growing divide in the Republican Party. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski making some headlines for hinting she might leave the party after choosing not to support former President Donald Trump. She has since clarified her remarks. Both Murkowski and Senator Susan Collins have voiced their opposition to the former president's 2024 bid. New CENTER Maine spoke to Collins this week and asked if she'd ever caucus outside the GOP.
I am a moderate Republican in the best tradition of New England, and I'm comfortable in that role. But I do believe in working across the aisle. I think if you listen to other people's points of view, and as a practical matter, the Democrats are in charge right now in the Senate. If you work with them, we can get so much more done.
Now, Ray, I know you're a big supporter of Trump, but is Collins trying to walk a fine line here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you're a member of a political party and you're not constantly analyzing what that party's doing, then you're not paying attention. You're just a rigid ideologue. I mean, I do it myself. I constantly look at the Republican Party. I do support President Trump because I think he's a better president than Joe Biden. If there were a different circumstance, I might choose differently. I don't think Senator Collins is walking a line here. She's a Republican. She always has been. She chooses not to support the current nominee. I don't think that that's some big sin of hers. I know some do. She's an American. She has every right to choose who she wants to support and who she doesn't want to support. But I think she'll always be a Republican. Her family is a Republican family, just as mine was. But do I think about it every now and then? I get doggone frustrated with some of these guys. And yeah, I've thought about leaving.
Cathy?
I'm not, by the way.
Yeah, Susan Collins does a great job of looking like a moderate and talking like a moderate. But when you look at her voting record, she is a Republican. She votes with her party. She voted with President Trump, including voting for Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade, 50 years of settled law. So, sure, she's not going to support Trump. That's her prerogative, but I don't think that her voting record is nearly as moderate as the way she likes to present herself.
I got to respectfully disagree. I mean, Susan Collins has always been very clear. The Constitution says advise and consent. And that doesn't mean ideology. That means a character issue or something like that. She's voted for judicial nominees of both parties. I think, for me, her voting record is far too moderate. But Susan Collins is who she is. She's never changed in all the time that I've known her. I've changed a little, but she never changed. And I think she is a New England moderate in the great tradition of New England deal makers.
All right. Going back to the race for the White House, 3 presidents, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton, came together for a campaign event at Radio City Music Hall in New York City, raising a record $25 million. Well, on the same day, former President Donald Trump attended the wake of a New York police officer shot and killed in the line of duty. Cathy, certainly quite the split screen here, but some say Trump was taking advantage of this tragedy.
It's hard. Trump taking advantage of a tragedy? Say it isn't so. I'm sorry, but that is his, he takes advantage of every situation. That is one of his strengths, is that he always sees an upside for himself. And that's what makes Donald Trump who he is. So, a fundraiser, political fundraiser, it is what it is. A funeral is something that is very different, where you're respecting someone who's, especially in this case, fallen in the line of duty. But we all know who Donald Trump is. He's very transparent. He's the person who, no matter what the situation is, will figure out a way to turn it to his advantage.
Right.
So again, I'll respectfully disagree. I think Donald Trump has been a long supporter of law enforcement. This is completely consistent with everything he did as president and prior to that. He's often paid off the mortgages of law enforcement members who have died in duty. so that their family wouldn't have to worry about their home. For me, the fundraiser is the fundraiser. It was long scheduled before the wake of this police officer, Jonathan Diller. I just find it a little ironic, I think that's the word I'll use, that these are the same people that complained about Citizens United and all the money in politics, and yet had the largest fundraiser in American history, $25 million. Seems a little rich to me.
And speaking of former President Trump, here in Maine, Republican congressional candidate Austin Theriault officially has the backing of Trump, a state lawmaker and former NASCAR driver from Aroostook County. He said in a statement he is excited to work with Trump to, quote, save America. Ray, clearly Republicans really want to unseat Jared Golden here.
Yeah, I think they do. And if things remain as they are right now, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump wins that district 12 to 15 points. We have a lot of stations, and half of my stations are in that district. I hear from them all the time, not just Republicans, but people across the spectrum. Mike Sobolewski's a good guy, and he and Austin have been fighting it out for Trump's support, and they both claim to be Trump's Republicans. And President Trump came out and endorsed Austin. So is it game, set, and match? I don't know, but it certainly gives a big leg up for Austin Theriault.
If it is game, set, match, Cathy, can Golden compete with this?
Well, of course he can, and that's the real question: is what the the general election will be. But in terms of the primary, if I were a person who lived in Aroostook County, I would want to know what these two gentlemen have done for my district and what they have done in the legislature and in other places of public service, where they have been able to improve life for people who live in Aroostook County. And to me, that's the question that should be on every voter's mind, not what someone from New York or Florida thinks about them.
All right, finally, winners, losers. Cathy, we'll start with you.
Well, I think the winners, and for sure, are the folks who managed to evacuate the bridge in Baltimore. I mean, it was a tragedy that 6 people who were working on the bridge died. But when I think about the fact that, that huge expanse had no cars on it, and what kind of incredible response and coordination that took on the part of public safety officials and first responders to make sure there was no other loss of life in that enormous tragedy. That was just extraordinary.
Loser?
Can you come back to me?
Sure. Right?
I have no loser, but the winners are Christians around the world. As we air today, it's Easter Sunday. I believe that the celebration of Easter and the day that Jesus Christ was resurrected is the most significant and important day in all of world history. And for those that choose him, they have salvation and they have paradise with the Father through eternity. So the winners are Christians around the world.
All right. Happy Easter to everybody. We'll leave it there. No losers this week. We'll find them next week. All right, Ray, Cathy, thanks so much. That's going to do it for this week's Political Brew. The Morning Report is back right after this.